Do you know the value of a click? Maybe. How about a view or an impression from an influencer or your own social media content? I'm not so sure. You should really check out my friends at Eisenberg. They've got this social index, and social index gives you earned media value of all your KPIs across all the main social platforms, including TikTok. And these values are updated every day. You don't want to be stuck in 2020, do you? Over 1,000 companies have used the social index to understand the ROI of their campaigns. And if you work with a social agency, you should really ask them to incorporate earned media values into your reports. Get your earned media value for social content. Visit earnedmediavalues.com. Again, that's earnedmediavalues.com.
For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today. On the show today, I've got Christian Beck. He's the executive partner overseeing growth strategy and design at Innovatemap. We talk a lot about design and UX and how he got into that field and why he doesn't feel like he's necessarily a marketer, even though he's responsible for marketing. We talk about how technology scale is outpacing our human cognition and why that matters, and what makes a good product, and much more. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Christian Beck. Christian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here to talk marketing, which is not necessarily my expertise, but I will definitely talk about it.
Well, I thought we would start there because this is a marketing podcast, but I know you don't see yourself as a marketer, but you're executive partner focused on growth, strategy, and design for Innovatemap. So, why do you not see yourself as a marketer?
That's a good question. Maybe I need to just, maybe that's a me problem. My background is design. So my education is in interaction design. So today, mostly call it UX design or product design. And I kind of shifted into marketing as, co-founding the Innovatemap agency, just kind of moving into that because the agency growth became more of my passion than design itself. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things where I kind of shifted into it in my career. And I don't know that I still fully identify as a marketer, but yeah, I suppose for all intents and purposes that I am a marketer today.
I guess your start was in design. What was it about design or UX? Where did you even get the idea that that was a field you could go into?
My mom, which is actually, mostly true. I started college in 2000 and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was majoring in pre-law because my father's a lawyer and I like to argue. So I was like, well, I guess I'll probably just do that. And that was about as much as I thought about it. And I struggled in college for a while because I didn't like it. And around that time, there was a new degree that came out called informatics. And this is at Indiana University. And it was really the study of, sort of technology and people. And that really resonated with me. And then through that, I took a software design course. And this is 2003. So, I mean, this is a long time ago. Pre-mobile and all that, and really before the internet really took off to what it is today. So, at that time, design was interesting to me because I liked technology, but I didn't really want to be a programmer or in hardware, but I really liked what it could do for people. People was always my interest in how you can bring things to life, how it affects, the social structures, the way we interact with each other. And design was the way I found that you can actually do that intentionally. So you can actually, that's when I discovered, you can design things to help guide people into certain ways. So that's kind of the long story, but I forgot to mention my mom. So where it came from was when I was struggling, my mother was teaching at a different Indiana University campus, and she heard about it. And she sent me this email about informatics. And so I was like, oh, that looks interesting. So I pretty much have her to thank for helping me find that field to begin with.
That's funny. Sometimes I guess our mothers know us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah, I would probably say more than sometimes, probably all the time. That's we're all on a journey to discover that reality. Some of us learn it earlier than others, I guess.
It's interesting that you found your way to UX or human-centered design. What kinds of classes were you taking during this time? I mean, I was in psych undergrad major, and within psychology, there's human-computer interaction classes and like perceptual classes and things like that, like how we perceive things, etc. I'm curious if your classes were a mix of like different disciplines or not.
Definitely they were. And I think without getting too academic, I think every interaction design program in the US at least, and it's a little bit different in Europe and Asia, but most of them are kind of born out of, some different type of science. Some will come from psychology, some more anthropology, some from computer science, and then that kind of flavors what it is. But at Indiana, it was very mixed between anthropology, psychology, and I would say even a little bit of sociology. So there's a lot of sort of ethics involved. There's courses like that. So it was definitely a mix. And you're right. A lot of interaction design is rooted in psychology, how we make decisions, why we make decisions. But as technology got, I would say, more collaborative, anthropology came up more. And you see that a lot today with remote work, collaboration software. So that was starting to gain steam when I was there as well, because now we need to understand, how do people, cooperate? How do they work together? How is culture represented through technology? And so that was where anthropology came in. So coursework was really a mix of all that. And then, the arts, come into play on how you actually design things, visual interfaces or interactions and things like that.
Last time we talked, you made this comment that I'd love to get you to like go a little deeper with me on, which was, I believe I got this right. Technology scale outpaces human cognition. I was just noodling this since our last conversation, and I think it's pretty profound statement.
Wow. Well, I don't know that anything I've said has been described as profound. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So a few years ago, I read this book by Thomas Friedman, who writes about a lot of things, politics and technology, but he had written this book called Thriving in the Age of Acceleration. And it was really thought-provoking in that it kind of described how the accelerating pace of technology will have profound, changes or impact on government, society, education, all of that. And so when I thought about that, I thought that sort of was what I was experiencing as a designer in technology. My master's degree, I got that in 2007, 1 month before the first iPhone was even announced. So smartphones were pretty small scale. BlackBerry was still dominating, and Samsung had some other phones and Motorola. But if you fast forward to now, and you're talking about augmented reality, blockchain, mobile is just a given, and desktops have kind of, you see how fast in that span of time technology has actually not just grown but accelerated. The gap is bigger now, or I think the evolution is faster. The cycles are faster with every year. And so when you think about like human cognition, and I see this as a parent, all of the parenting techniques, as I've realized from my parents' generation, are not really relevant today. It's like, okay, we had cartoons on TV when I was a kid, but you didn't have YouTube, and the idea that your kid could click on something that's inappropriate, or just this auto playing YouTube thing. So just as a really silly example, right? So as a parent, I'm realizing, well, almost all of the techniques that you had growing up were not relevant today anymore, because technology has completely changed the landscape. And you think about, are we really able to keep up with this as humans? Our brains aren't evolving that. Our brains are not, between generations, evolving at the same rate that technology is. So we're always a little bit kind of behind the curve. So now when you look at over the last 2 years, especially as the ethics and race and gender have really come to the fore in technology, you can see just how badly we've gotten, we've lost our eyes on that. And part of that is due to people being educated just on the STEM side of things, science, technology, engineering, and math, and forgetting about anthropology, psychology, and things like that. And we're having to go back and realize that technology that we've been growing at breakneck speeds, we haven't actually designed very well for today's society. So that's kind of what I mean by that technology is outpacing. And you see that from companies like Facebook to even companies like Robinhood with trading, that these well-designed things or things that are like, build fast and break things off and approach isn't holding up under the weight of some of the issues we're having in society today. So a lot of those things are driven by technology just being far too fast for us to keep up with.
And I mean, do you see it then like solving this fact that technology just outpaces our ability to process it? It sounds like you see that as a design challenge potentially.
Absolutely. I think that's where my interest came from, because we shouldn't necessarily slow down technology. It just is what it is. But the funny thing I also noticed as technology was accelerating is I would talk to these young design students who graduate and say, how do you keep up with this? And I was like, honestly, as much as things have changed around me, the fundamental principles haven't really changed. So a lot of these, the social implications of technology, they're not really any different now than they were 30 years ago. They just have different, situations that have arisen because the scalability of technology is so vast. So for example, if you design something and it harms a particular user group that in a way you didn't intend, 20 years ago, you might be talking about tens of users that are negatively affected. Today, if you design something, it could be affecting on the order of thousands or millions of people. We haven't really seen any technology in history that can have that profound of an impact that quickly. But at the root of it is still the same principles. It's the same sciences that are involved. And from a design perspective, we're pretty much just talking about the exact same design principles that we've been talking about for decades. So a lot of what I see is just an acknowledgement that as much as technology may change, you almost have to just like stay steadfast in how you design for human behavior, just like you did before. And if anything, I would say the design need has grown. And you see that in software companies. You see more designers there every day. And what's really fascinating is you'll see more people with liberal arts degrees, anthropology, psychology backgrounds coming in and working with technology teams to help those teams understand people a little bit better. So I think that's where the growth is happening. But yes, of course, I'm a designer by nature, so I will always view that design is the solution.
But it makes sense. It makes sense for a lot of reasons that you laid out. I would love to know, what is Innovatemap? Tell me a little bit about the firm and how it came to be and what you guys do.
It started in 2014. Our CEO, left my previous company where we met to start it, and approached me to start it with him as the lead designer. And so I'll be honest now, because I understand the vision of the agency today, but I'll be honest, at the time when he approached me, my vision for it was nil. I had no vision. I just believed in the passion he had, and I was curious to try something new. And that's about as far as it went. I was spending about 5 actual hours a week designing software, and the rest of the time filled with bureaucratic management meetings and things like that. And I just had this pretty stupid hypothesis that if I can design multi-million-dollar software in about 5 hours a week, surely I must be able to design for more companies at a time. And that was really all it was for me. But his vision was that, this is 2014, and we started in Indianapolis in the Midwest, where we're probably a few years behind, where the West Coast is with technology. But at that time, the concept of product was still really new. Indianapolis has had a lot of technology success. We've had a lot of major exits here, and then those have been equitable and come back and fed into the community in Indianapolis. And so with that came more startups, more technology companies. But what he saw, Mike Reynolds, our CEO, was that the way to win in the next, sort of phase of technology was going to be through product. So are you building the right thing? Is it marketed? Does it sell well? And is it well designed? Before, you could get by with just digitizing paper straight up. And my first job at AutoCAD, we were designing software that was just digitizing paper. That's effectively what it was. And so AutoCAD has a great design team, but a lot of companies in that era could just design software to replace paper. Low bar. It doesn't really matter how well it's designed. It's going to be better than paper. In the next wave, you'll see more competition. And that's what he saw So he wanted to create an agency to serve many companies that were not going to be able to bring these roles in-house. So think about roles like VPs of product management, directors of UX, brand designers, creative directors, and product marketers, which in 2014, there's almost like no product marketing to be heard of outside of the Valley. And so the whole hypothesis was, can we build an agency rooted in people that came from software, serving software companies in a new way to help them scale their products successfully before they can afford to bring those roles in-house? And so that was really where it started. Was we believed that was the future, and that there weren't going to be enough people to effectively help companies in-house create success around that. So as we fast forward to today, I think we've had a lot of success where we've scaled outside of Indianapolis now and worked throughout the Midwest and East Coast. And yeah, I think what we thought was true is definitely true, that product is the most important aspect of building a successful technology company today. So brand, product marketing, design, and product management.
You guys are all about product, so to speak, than the design of it, as well as marketing. What makes a good product?
The tagline that we always use, which sounds like a tagline and it will sound cheesy, but I'm going to say it because it's real. Better product is marketable, valuable, and usable. So what that means, so from my perspective, or my background is in design, it was really all about making things usable. I only worked for large multi-million-dollar software companies, in my two companies before starting Innovatemap. I took for granted that somebody was in charge of selling it and making sure the value was connecting with buyers. I just made it usable. Once I entered out into the agency world and we're working with startups that are just starting, you realize to make something usable, it means that you've actually sold it. And if you sold it, that means that you've made it marketable. So I realized that it was all three of those. And so you'll find some software companies do a great job marketing, the usability sucks. So you start using it and you just, it's not a delight to use, right? So that's where we see the confluence of product. It's really, if you think about it from like a buyer journey, if you're making a product to put in the market, it's really starting with, have you positioned it in the market correctly? And then are you messaging it correctly through the words you use? Is it resonating with pains or aspirations? And then if it is, do you make it easy to buy? So there's a lot of software companies that do those first things, and then it's a huge pain to buy. The dreaded like contact for demo button, which I'm always trying to get people to stop doing. Like that's a gate to buying your product. Then once you buy it, if you get through that process, is it a delight to use? Do you want to keep using it? Do you want to share it with other people? So that's really the journey from a prospect to a customer to an advocate for your product. And so if you can nail all of those, which is possible today, then that's what I think makes a successful product.
I love the three elements. And as somebody that's running a marketing podcast, a marketer himself, unfortunately, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that like we have to put what we say lipstick on a pig. We're making something marketable that's really just junk at the end of the day. It's not usable or more importantly, and probably more painfully, it doesn't provide any value or very limited.
And I definitely sympathize with that. I've learned that in sales and marketing, that I definitely couldn't do what I do for something I didn't believe in. And I think, I do appreciate a lot of marketers are doing that for companies the products they may not love. And that's a really tough task because you're basically asking marketers to do more than they should have to do. I mean, a lot of your marketing should be easy if the product is well designed. It shouldn't, there's no such thing as selling itself, but it should feel that way. It should feel like when you're marketing something, it sells itself, because then it's more authentic, it's easier to write copy, all of those things get easier. But I definitely sympathize with a lot of the listeners of this that are probably not in a situation where they just love the product that they're in.
Right. But it creates an opportunity for the company that they're working for, the organization. Just have to figure out the best way to maximize that opportunity, or go find something that's more valuable to market. So you're also a podcaster. So this is one podcaster talking to another. Tell me about your Better Product podcast and how it got started.
So I should caveat this with, I'm not a huge podcast listener, not out of not liking podcasts, but really out of, I think, circumstance. I have a fairly short commute. And I typically like to listen to music when I exercise. So without those two things, it's very hard to get through podcasts. It can take me Monday through Wednesday to get through one episode of anything on my drive to work. So that's that. Now, I'm a huge believer that podcasts in general, audio is the sort of next wave. Think about blogs about 15, 20 years ago or something like that. That's kind of where podcasting is. I also say I was listening to podcasts in like 2008 before like they were on iTunes, and I was listening to like stuff you missed in history class. I still have these like really old episodes. And I'm like, when podcasts got hot again, I was like, I think I've heard of this before. And I remember listening to those. So I've always felt there's a lot of opportunity in audio. But for me, the podcast was a way to start talking to product leaders. I mean, I'll break it down really simply. I am a fan of great products, and the podcast was a way for me to have an excuse to find the people behind those and talk to them. I mean, that was pretty much at the root what it was. The second sort of idea was it's called Better Product because my goal is to elevate what better product looks like. I believe that, we're in this massive sea change in technology that, while it may have started years ago, we're still in this transformational phase to get technology companies to take the product side of what they do more seriously. And so I think a part of that is providing more examples of what great product is. I was finding a lot of times when our agency is working with clients, they'll say things like, oh, I want to be like Apple, or I want to be as easy to adopt as a Facebook or something. And I would say, that's like wanting to learn how to play basketball, like from Michael Jordan or LeBron, or football from Tom Brady. It's like, those are great, but they aren't really helpful to the average person because they are exceptional. And so Apple's the same way, right? So I was realizing there are actually a lot of great products that you may not have heard of at a bunch of different phases. Some, pre-seed, some pre-revenue, some Series A, B, publicly traded companies. Why not create a show that highlights those to start showing people that there's actually better product in all different types of industries, a bunch of different markets, and in a bunch of different ways. So that's where it started. Was I really just wanted to have a focus on product, not just the practitioner. There's a lot of podcasts about product design or about product management, the fields, but I wanted something that actually focused on the product and then worked backwards to say, okay, how did you make this? What were the decisions that went behind this to help elevate product to people?
That's really interesting. And I should give a shout out actually to the group that put us face to face, so to speak. We both share with Share Your Genius is our production partners on the back end of all this listening that listeners are doing. So thank you for Share Your Genius for putting us together so we can have this conversation.
They were the ones that helped me see that it was possible. So I definitely give them a lot of kudos. I think it's easier today, but when we started the podcast 2.5 years ago, I think wanting to start a podcast felt like an insurmountable mountain. It's like, oh, yeah, sure, I'd love to climb Mount Everest someday too, but you don't even know where to start. And Share Your Genius definitely helped make it seem real and actually worked on a show that I was actually proud of.
Well, you've extended the podcast into the Better Product community. Why was that important?
Well, I'm going to give one more shout out to Share Your Genius because they've been pushing me on community for years, and I didn't really understand it, to be honest. So I kind of just let it go. I'm still learning what community, really means. And part of it was just my own, kind of ignorance about what people really wanted. But the idea for the community was always there. Can we build a podcast that people enjoyed and then build a community for these people to connect to each other? I don't know what it is about me personally, but I always have a hard time thinking people want to connect. But then the pandemic happened and I realized just how badly I wanted to connect with people. And I think for me, I just didn't think about it enough. And so when we started returning back to work, like literally in the office earlier this year, we had started this community about 1.5 years ago. Yeah, so let me back up for there real quick. About 1.5 years ago, we were going to have this conference. And that was going to be the sort of hallmark event to sort of kick off this community. We had speakers, everything planned, a space booked. And then, the pandemic happened and we canceled it. So it didn't happen. Then we went all digital, all remote, kept adding people to the community. We weren't really doing anything with it, but it was really this year, once we started returning back to work and we started trying to grow the community in other geographies, we realized that the people that we were adding desperately wanted to meet each other. And it started to become more apparent to me that what the show did was put the focus on product, not the practice or the discipline, which means that the listeners came from all different types of disciplines. We have people from marketing, from engineering, from product marketing, from design, from brand, all listening to it, getting different pieces. And those people are not always talking. Even in the same company, marketing doesn't even always talk to product. I can attest to this. I mean, at Autodesk, our marketing team was literally in a different building than ours was. And it was, like a good 12-minute walk to get there. So we never really interacted. And then in larger geos like, New York City, even though it's a large city, they're feeling disconnected. They're not talking to each other. So we started realizing that as we built the interest in education around product, we started to create this multidisciplinary community that people that wanted to talk to each other. So we started diving in to start building out that community. And that's where we're at right now is starting to figure out like what are the ways we're going to support the community rather than just a podcast and writing some blog articles.
That's really interesting. And so like, is the desire to get back to keep things virtual, and distributed, or to be in person, or a combination of both?
This feels like a hot take, but I'm all about in person.
Okay.
So if I think that virtual will supplement, but I definitely want in person to be there. There's just some richness that you get from having these things in person. But I think virtual has its place, and it's more prevalent in this vision for the community than it probably was in my mind 2 years ago. But in person is a big piece of it. But I think we need to figure out some better virtual ways to connect people. Like, for example, we've been asked to create a Slack community for, I don't know, a year. I push back on it all the time. It's like, people have Slack fatigue and all that, but people keep asking. And I'm like, all right, fine. We should do it because people want to do it. But if we're going to do it, we need to do it well. I'm in a lot of Slack workspaces, and there's some that there's no activity, and there's some that are great. And it's like, I really just didn't want to be one that just kind of languished over time. Wanted something with a mission, with intention. So there will be a virtual component to that too, to get people talking about things and connecting with people they otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to meet.
Well, it's been fun talking about product and like both your community building aspects, the podcast that you're working on. I'd love to switch gears and get to know you a little bit better, although we know that your mom inspired your career. But one of my favorite questions to ask listeners or guests that come on is, has there been an experience of your past that defines or makes up who you are today?
I would say going back to even the story I told earlier about learning about informatics from my mom was the beginning of a new path for me. Honestly, I struggled in college for the first year and a half. So that helped correct that. But through that coursework, I found this human computer interaction design course. It's 2003. I was a junior. And it clicked. I've had very few moments in my life where I could say that felt like a Hollywood movie, where it felt like the skies parted and like there was like some harp playing in the background. But like there was a moment in that class where I felt like I had my calling. And I remember going down to the professor that was teaching it and saying, there's something about this class that just I get. Could I talk to you about it more, like over lunch? And I think that's stumbled through saying something like that. And he said, what do you want to talk about? I was like, honestly, I don't really know. You just seem like somebody that knows things, and I want to talk to you. And that was probably the gist of what I said. And his name was Marty Siegel, and he oversaw the graduate program at Indiana, and he was great. And that moment probably changed the course and formed like who I was, because he took the time to talk to me and share what design was. And he took an interest in me and challenged me. He wasn't easy on me through my undergrad and grad school, but he's always been in my corner, and it still is today. So I would say that moment probably sort of created the new foundation for me as a designer, which now, even though I'm not designing anymore, I would say still sort of colors everything that I do as a professional.
If you're starting this journey all over again, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, probably be patient. I've been asked this a lot recently for some other things, and I keep thinking about how impatient I was at the time, just constantly, wondering when things were going to break for me, or when, my ship was going to come in. All these like things you worry about. Then you look at your peers and say, oh, he's making six figures already at such and such company, am I doing enough? Like there was just way too much worry about that. And so I think as a result, I did the things I thought I should do, like just worked hard and worked more. And if I had slowed down and I was more patient, I think that would have helped my own sanity. But then I think it would have helped me see too that building relationships is really the most fruitful, most fulfilling, and most long-term value you can do for yourself. And I would have done more of that earlier on in my career. I do a lot more of that now. But early on, it was all about the hustle and just working more hours. And I realized a lot of that wasn't really that beneficial for me.
It's funny. I mean, a lot of people come on the show, and there's not everyone, obviously, but like there's definitely been a theme in the recent, I'd say, last 6 months or more of this: just be patient, or slow down, or not be so aggressive. Like, yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's like youthful aggression or something. I don't know. That's like driving us at those early years. But it's funny how often I've heard something similar or in the same vein recently. Well, switching to marketing a little bit more, what do you think marketers need to be learning about right now?
I don't want to say design again,
but design.
but I would say design. I think so. This may be a polarizing or maybe incendiary comment to make, but part of the reason I say design when we talk about marketing is because I was genuinely surprised when I sort of entered the world of marketing how poorly design was utilized and understood by marketers, because I often felt that they were kind of one and the same. I grew up thinking about marketing through like ad agencies from the outside, and you think about a great Nike ad or a great Apple ad, and then you just think, oh, clearly marketers just like no design. Then you start realizing that's not always the case. And the more I dug in, I think marketers are so focused on the tech stack or the tactics or bounce rates and other metrics like that. And I think it's lost sight of some of the other sort of intangible pieces to what can make easy marketing, which I mentioned earlier, which is really, is it well designed? Are you doing things that are authentic and true to your company and your mission? And so I think design is something I wish marketers honestly really learned about. They don't need to be designers, but they need to learn about it. And a part of that journey might be actually building relationships with the designers of the product that are in your company today, or even the designers on your team, rather than seeing designers as sort of functions that serve a role. You see them as value providers. The first time I heard of the word creative used as a noun was through marketers saying, oh, that's the creatives worry about that. And I'm like, even just saying it that way commoditizes creative. And so, yeah, but what you do is creative as well. They have a particular lens on creativity, but I wish marketers understood design, and then I think they would see designers on their team more as value providers and making their jobs easier, rather than, okay, we've got this email, we've got the copy, we need the banner on the top. Cool, let's go send that over to the creatives. That sort of mentality, I think, is one of the things I think could really change in marketing.
I'll double down on that. I don't think it's incendiary at all. And I think marketers today think about design with a little d versus a big D. You probably know intuitively what I mean, but design is all of the disciplines coming together to create something, like you said, in your words, marketable, valuable, and usable, right? Like, I almost kind of blame ad agencies, frankly, like the current state of ad agencies for creating this problem. Because if you go back in the day when there was truly great advertising, no one was called a creative. You might have an account person, but they were account person and strategist. And you had copywriter that was a copywriter, and an art person that was, help draw the pictures or take the words and bring them to life. And they worked very collaboratively. And now those tend to be kind of siloed functions, if you will, even within inside of an ad agency. And I think marketers have just adopted that principle, unfortunately, for everyone.
That makes sense. And as a quick caveat, I will tell if anybody doubts my sincerity in that comment, when I'm talking to design students, when they ask me what they need to learn more, I say marketing. So I am not advocating for design. I work for everybody. So I do say that to that field too, because I would say in design, they get very self-centered and think design will save the world and can forget that other disciplines are a part of it too. So anyway, just want to give that caveat. I'm an advocate for all, everybody.
You're speaking my language. I'm a Libra, so I'm seeking balance. It sounds like you're doing the same thing. So I got two more questions for you. On a personal note, are there any brands, companies, or causes that you follow or you think other people should take notice of?
Oh, there's so many things. If you think about the word cause, I'd say like from a high level, I think a lot of the social and ethics side of technology, people need to be paying attention to if you aren't already getting versed in what ethics is so you can make better decisions as marketers. You think about brands or companies. I mentioned Robinhood earlier. I'll mention them again here because I think that they are the new type of product company, started by whatever their founders are, Gen Z. I don't get, they're like in their late 20s, whatever that generation is, but they're young founders, ignorant to the way of software from the past, and they started a company that's very different, disrupting, a very old industry, which is, stock trading. And they came in with a mission. And the reason why I say they're worth watching is because it's a double-edged sword what they've done. There's a lot of positives and some negatives. They've had lawsuits that, you look at headlines that are say, is it too easy to trade on Robinhood? And there's some legitimate, questions about have they made it too easy? But on the flip side, on the positive, like, wow, that's the power of design and design thinking and brand. So I think watching them, especially as they're about to go public on the stock market, is really interesting to see. Will they grow up in a different way? What does this create in terms of a role model for the next wave of tech companies? So I think that that's one. And then I think if you think about an industry sort of related to fintech would be blockchain. Even though I think it's bigger than fintech, I still think the technology, it's still early. And we went through a wave probably 4 years ago, and we're going through another one, and this mini bubble will burst. But I do think that we're getting closer to what blockchain starting to have some really transformational effects on technology, the way that HTTP and HTML did towards the late 90s. It took a good decade plus for that to start to disrupt and change the end user experience, but I think we'll be there with blockchain soon. I think it's important that people really understand, at least from arm's length, what's going on. And that's as much as I'm going to say, because don't ask me any more about it, because I won't be able to tell you exactly what it does. That's why I'm constantly learning, because it's hard to understand.
It makes sense. And there's so many applications of blockchain as well, from cryptocurrency, which most people, I think of first, to, I guess, most recently, the NFT move. I think blockchain is embedded in that as well. But anyway, well, last question for you. What do you think is the largest opportunity or threats that marketers face today?
If I think about it from a threat perspective, it's always hard. I was thinking about the word threat, and I was trying to understand, like, is this the only lens to look at things through? Is because I think the positive version of a threat is, like what you said, is an opportunity. And so I think there are marketers that feel threatened, at least in the digital, the SaaS space, for product-led growth and what it's doing. Salespeople especially, because they feel like it's a threat to their own job. And I think there's even shifts with marketing shifting to product marketing, and product marketing sometimes reporting into product and taking some away from market. So I think if you look at those trends, it can feel a bit like a threat. But I actually think it's a greater opportunity, because if you can flip that, you actually realize that product and design, as I just said a second ago, design students, they don't understand marketing at all. And they're actually hungry to understand what it is. So if you can ever step away from the sort of turf war that exists inside of a company and realign on what the mission is and see everybody as collaborators, there's immense opportunities for marketers to collaborate so much more with people on the product side and the design side than ever before. And so that's, I guess, the same, two sides of the same coin. It is a threat to marketers. But I would say it's only a threat in that marketers' jobs, titles, roles are evolving. It's no different than it was for design. Designers today have evolved so much in the last 10 years. And I think marketers are in the process of going through that evolution. But I think it's a tremendous opportunity, because you have a lot that you can bring to the table with new groups. So there may be some marketers that need to reinvent themselves a little bit. But I think on the other side of it is actually a lot more. There's a lot more fulfillment in your job working with new people.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me. with support from my team and podcast editors, sound engineers, and writers at Share Your Genius. Find them at shareyourgenius.com. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe on marketingtodaypodcast.com and tell your friends and colleagues about the show. I love to hear from listeners. You can contact me on marketingtodaypodcast.com. There, you will also find complete show notes, links to what was discussed in the episode today, and you can search our archives. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.